So during this video, I'm going to describe what a relationship with somebody with borderline subset discouraged looks like. And at the end of it, I'm just going to put some summarized lists, some summarized points. Again, if one or two factors lines up, don't jump to a conclusion you're dealing with borderline. I'm not saying that at all. You'll know if you're dealing with borderline because really almost nothing else will explain a relationship with somebody dealing with borderline. So take a look at it at the end, and during the video, I'm going to try to explain what it feels like, what the experience is like to be in a relationship with somebody wrestling with borderline, especially the subset of discouraged. And at the end, there's going to be a summary. So kind of hang tight till the end and see if this fits. And I hope it's a help. All right, thanks a lot. You'll know if what I'm describing fits your situation, because this is one where it's not just limerence. If you've heard Coach Lee talk about limerence, it's not just on a scale of 1 to 10. This person is like my 10. I'm talking about if the person that just broke up with you on a scale of 1 to 10, you were their 15, and you were crazy about them, and they were even more crazy about you. In the beginning, maybe they saw you as their Prince Charming or Princess Charming. They kind of saw you as the person they've been waiting on their whole life. They idealized you. The shift from being somebody that was so incredibly loved and so highly sought after and highly valued to going into a state of usually what looks like just kind of a drop in attraction, suddenly a little bit of a slight anxiety, second guessing. In other words, this is a person that for the longest time, and it can be for weeks, it can be for days, it can even be for years sometimes, this person just sees you as just kind of untouchable, wonderful, enamored with you, in love with you. And then when it looks like the two of you are about to get your happily ever after, it looks like the two of you are actually going to start your life together, when things look like you finally get your moment, suddenly the anxiety spikes. They start to second guess who you are. They start to use terms like, I just don't know what I want. I don't know if this is the right thing. I kind of lost who I am. I lost myself. I don't know what I want. And then they look back on the time together with you and they'll say, and besides, what took you so long? You should have been more in love with me sooner. I shouldn't have had to have chased you for this long. Why have I been more in love with you than you've been in love with me? Maybe we're not actually the right fit. Maybe we're not supposed to be together. They'll say things like, I've just been having trouble with anxiety lately, and if we were supposed to be together, then I wouldn't be feeling this way, right? The anxiety itself becomes evidence to them that they shouldn't be with you. And they'll look back even on that time together that was so great with you for so long, and suddenly there's questions there. Well, maybe I just kind of lost who I am. Maybe I just kind of lost track of myself. I just need some time. I'm not saying I don't want to be with you forever. I'm just saying I don't feel at peace with this right now, and I need some space. If you find yourself in that situation, I wanted to have a video that kind of describes what you might be dealing with. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm trying to be very clear. Not everybody dealing with borderline is going to look the same. Not everybody's going to react the same. People are different. They have different morals. They have different backgrounds. They have different reactions. But there are certain principles to look for to see if this might fit. If this is a situation when you're dealing with borderline, the funny thing is almost nothing else will explain it, because borderline has a very consistent inconsistency about it. That's the best way I know how to say it. So I'm just going to go ahead and start in describing what it looks like. Normally, it's not always a woman, but majority of the time, there's a larger percentage of women that report with borderline or diagnosed with borderline than men. But normally, whoever has it, it starts from the time they're brought home from the hospital in many cases. They're brought home and they're raised in an emotionally inconsistent environment. What I mean by that is on the outside, it can either look obviously critical. It can look obviously like they're being pushed and that nothing they do is enough, an unstable, emotionally unhealthy environment. Sometimes it can look like a really good environment from the outside. It can look like the family is protective. It can look like a loving place. But normally the key relationship, that's kind of the first domino to start it all, is a mother who's overly or exceptionally close to that daughter or to that child. Normally the mother is going to be overly critical and overly assertive. Like, you better make sure that you do this or this is going to happen. Why don't you do this? If you don't do this, then this is going to happen. Just kind of constantly driving them. There's an emotional inconsistency in the environment, but there's a high degree of expectation. In other words, the daughter better know, or the child better know, to act, to perform, to look, to behave in a certain way. So at a very early age, they're wrestling with two conflicting things: high expectation, but a low degree of emotional consistency and nurturing. By the time they're in their teenage years, They're wrestling with depression, anxiety, second guessing themselves, stress to an unusual level. I mean, every teenager is going to go through some depression, but this is a higher degree. A lot of times they already start having ideation to self-harm or to hurt themselves. By the time they become young adults, that idealized thinking many times is really solid and started to form. In other words, they know how they need to look, they know how they need to act, they can start to idealize the relationship, and they're drawn to one of three types of men more than any other. The first type of man that they're drawn to is actually a narcissist. They're drawn to men who have a strong sense of identity. A narcissist is full of himself, so they have a very strong sense of identity. They have a very consistent priority. It's themselves. As strange as it is, that strong sense of identity, even though if it might belong to a douchebag, is actually attractive to somebody wrestling with borderline. Because deep down, they feel like they're not really worthy of the man of their dreams. But the man of their dreams is somebody that they've idealized, somebody with a strong sense of who he is, a strong sense of identity. Because borderline at its base is an identity crisis. They don't know how to feel certain about being certain. What they have is an idealized version of what life is supposed to look like in their mind, and they're driving towards it. Part of that idealized picture is that man who has a strong sense of who he is, strong sense of confidence, strong sense of certainty about who he is. So they're drawn to that. The second type is what we refer to as kind of a orchestrator mentality. Somebody that organizes things, that has a strong plan, that has strong feelings, that has a kind of a checklist, a structure to his life. He knows where he's headed. He knows when he's going to get there. Again, a strong sense of identity. Now, he might not look like the narcissist, but that's what they have in common. They both have a strong idea of who they are. And the third one is the one that they seem to be the most passionately or romantically drawn to, and that's what we call a conqueror mentality. Somebody that's kind of got that poet-warrior mentality. The guy that can be both romantic, sweet, sacrificial, but can also be bold, can also be very transparent, confident in who they are, passionate people that are loud when they need to be. They don't tell you what they think. They just have a strong sense of personality. A lot of times this is the guy that might be pulled into law enforcement, might be pulled into the military, might be an entrepreneur, just has a strong sense and is kind of a natural charismatic kind of guy. They're really drawn to that guy, the poet warrior dude. Now, all three of those guys don't look alike, but they have one thing in common. They have a strong sense of identity. They know who they are. In some ways, they're impressive in different ways, but they all have ways that they kind of stand out from the crowd. Now, when the woman meets a man like that, he's easier to idealize. He's easier to fit into her version of what the perfect couple and the perfect family and the perfect life looks like. So when these two people get together, it's like fireworks. It's like limerence on cocaine. It's like limerence on crack. It's like limerence on Viagra. It's like it's greater than that normal sense of falling in love, which is already powerful enough. This is another level. This is really addictive. You start hearing phrases like, "You're my soulmate. I've never met anybody like this before. I've been waiting on someone like you. You're my dream person. I never knew I could feel this way." You start using those idealized and high-end terms. And here's the confusing part. For a long time, this couple can stay together and be happy. Sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes even years, as long as there's an element of instability to the relationship. Sometimes you can exist in these euphoric, wonderful relationships as long as you're not living together, as long as you're not engaged, as long as you have a long-distance relationship, as long as there's some aspect to the relationship that keeps that person suffering from borderline, if she keeps it in a state of in pursuit of you just a little. But a lot of times when she finally catches your heart, when it looks like you're moving from planning to be together forever and falling in love, so we're completely in love. And we're not just planning happily ever after, we're about to start living it. Like maybe you've been engaged for a while, but now the wedding date's getting closer. Maybe you've been living in separate states, but you're about to move into the same city. Maybe you're about to move in together. Something that looks like it's going to solidify the fact that the two of you are going to be together long term. Suddenly, when it looks like she's finally caught the man of her dreams, that for so long she's considered out of her league, when she's actually caught him, suddenly this internal anxiety spikes. And it's like, well, maybe this is a mistake. Maybe we don't belong together. Maybe I chased you too long, and maybe you didn't want me soon enough. And then they'll look back on the idealized time, the time when things were so good together, and they'll say things like, I kind of lost who I am. And if we were really supposed to be together, why didn't you realize it sooner? Why did it take you this long? And now that I think about it, I don't know if I can do this. I think what you're giving me, even though you're finally willing to commit to me the way that I've always wanted you to commit to me, I think it's too little too late. When I think about us being together, I get anxious and I don't feel a sense of peace. And if we were supposed to be together, I wouldn't be feeling anxious. The anxiety itself becomes evidence to them that maybe the two of you aren't supposed to be together. Well, now this person who's loved you more than anybody's loved you in the past starts to pull away. So then a lot of times the guy starts to panic. Well, wait, maybe you're right. I'm sorry. They start trying to make up for the fact that they weren't as committed. They start trying to make up for the fact that they weren't as invested in the relationship. Now they're afraid they're about to lose the person that they've really loved. So they get desperate to try to win you back. They get desperate to try to win that person back who's now disconnecting from them. And they start chasing. The more you start to chase in this situation, the more the attraction will keep dropping until they can go from breaking up with you, even though you can tell they're not really sure why they're breaking up with you or if it's the right move to break up with you. But the more you chase, the more certain they become that they shouldn't be with you. Now, if you take a deep breath and you kind of project yourself with resilience and confidence and you're willing to give them the breakup, then a lot of times that is the trigger that makes them start to second guess if they just walked away from the man of their dreams. Now they see you as the man of their dreams again. So what I'm talking about with borderline, it's an identity crisis. Deep down, they think the man of their dreams is too good, is too strong, and is too high value to want to be with somebody like them because deep down, they have a deep sense of insecurity. A lot of times they feel like they're a little bit broken, too broken for the man of their dreams to want to be with. So when you keep trying to tell them that no matter what, you're going to be there, no matter what, you're never going to walk away, you're actually killing the attraction. You're accidentally proving to them that you're not the guy they've been waiting on. You're not the man of their dreams. The man of their dreams is too good and too strong and too high value to want to be with them, and you keep telling them that you want to be with them no matter what. So you're accidentally working against yourself. Borderline is like an anxiety dysregulation. It's a fear of engulfment, and it's a fear of abandonment. Once you get out of that idealized stage when they see you as perfect, suddenly they do something called splitting, and they start kind of redefining you, and they start redefining how good the relationship has been. And they'll look back on even a fantastic relationship, probably the best relationship you've ever had, and suddenly they'll see problems that you didn't see before, and they redefine you. They start to magnify future problems. Like, we shouldn't be together anyway because our age difference. We shouldn't be together anyway because you have kids, because of family, because of long distance. They'll pull out reasons that have always been true, but now suddenly they're just obstacles you can't overcome because that anxiety that's driving them is looking for a reason why you can't be together. Now, the other thing about borderline, it's very similar to dissociative identity disorder, which is what they used to call split personality. The difference is there's not two personalities. There's not multiple personalities, but it's almost like there's two people that you're dealing with. One of them is sincerely in love with you. One of them is wounded and honest and transparent and passionate, and that's the one that you fell in love with. But then once they feel like they've started to split, once they start to shift into that other stage that I've been talking about, where they disconnect from you, they start to magnify the flaws, and they can be very cold. Suddenly the person who's been the most passionate, the most loving, the most understanding, and the most sensitive and supportive of you can seem like almost like you're dealing with a robot. Like they've decided that you don't mean as much to them as you did before, and suddenly they can be capable of saying some really cold things, some really cruel things, some disrespectful things, and it leaves the guy very confused because now he's got this woman who loved him better and stronger than anybody who's ever loved him before, but now talking to him like his feelings don't matter, like he doesn't matter to her anymore, and it only adds to the pain. And a lot of times it can trigger him to go into like a extreme pursuit because he's trying to get back the woman that he lost that existed not so long ago. Maybe it was only a couple of weeks. Maybe it was only a month ago that she was completely in love with him. And now she's crying and breaking up with him and telling him she doesn't know why, but she can't be with him anymore. So if you find yourself in that situation, when you walk away with strength, look at borderline as an anxiety dysregulation. It's kind of like a pendulum. In other words, the first swing is when she sees you as that perfect guy, the guy that's too good to be with her. The anxiety exists in the form of maybe you're going to decide not to be with her. Maybe you're going to find somebody better. Maybe you don't love her as much as she loves you. Well, then that drives her to kind of be the perfect person for you. But then when she catches your heart, the other anxiety takes over. Well, what if he's not the one? Why did I have to chase him so much? Suddenly she'll magnify all the flaws and all the challenges in the relationship until the anxiety drives her to push away from you. If you walk away with strength, a lot of times just kind of reminding her and projecting that sense of resilience and strong sense of identity and purpose that drew her to you in the first place, a lot of times that'll trigger her to start second guessing the decision she just made. Well, maybe he is the one. Maybe I'm making a mistake. After all, deep down, there's a fear that she's going to sabotage and drive away the man of her dreams. So when you accept the breakup with strength and start to walk away, suddenly you look like that man that she fell in love in the first place. So a lot of times, if you accept the breakup with strength, they'll come after you again. Once they come after you again, if you jump back into the relationship, yes, thank God, that was so scary. I'm so glad you want me back. Let's make this work. Not long after that, she'll push away again. And you'll find yourself in this no man's land, just kind of treading water. Because the truth is, somebody with borderline is afraid of you getting too close because the anxiety starts to spike. Maybe they're going to get back into the relationship that caused the anxiety that made them break up with you in the first place. But then you get too far away. Now you're creating the anxiety that makes them afraid they're about to lose the love of their life. So you're caught in a relationship between two anxieties, dealing with a person that seemed like almost two people. If what I'm describing to you lines up, and I don't mean one aspect, I don't mean just two aspects. I mean, if you have multiple aspects building up, a lot of times they have a pretty bad temper. They can be sexually compulsive, but intense. So when you have the sex life with somebody like this, a lot of times it's kind of off the charts. And there's 4 different subsets, right? So 2 of them are more extroverted. You can refer to those as extroverted and petulant. They're more dangerous. They're more volatile. You could watch the Amber Heard trial with Johnny Depp. You're going to see that extroverted version of borderline there with histrionic disorder. But then there's 2 other more subtle ones where the anxiety and the pain is more introverted. And somebody who's suffering with borderline, especially borderline discouraged or borderline self-destructive, they're in just as much pain as the pain you might find yourself in, because they're kind of caught between 2 different compulsions. They're caught between feeling like they're making the mistake, that they're about to commit to something that's going to cause them anxiety the rest of their life if they decide to stay with you. If they say, I do, if they plunge into that commitment, they're afraid they're going to regret it every day and they're going to feel trapped. That anxiety builds until they push away because they don't have a choice. That's the only way they can get relief from it. But then when you walk away with strength and it looks like maybe they've lost you forever, it's really easy for them to start to second guess that until the anxiety and the fear of loss makes it really unbearable for them to live without you. So a lot of times somebody suffering from borderline is in just as much pain as you. Not every borderline is the same. In some cases, I couldn't tell my clients strong enough to run away as fast and as far as you can and don't look back. In other cases, those are some very beautiful, meaningful, rare, gifted, loving people who really are just kind of living out these reactions to a childhood and to a trauma that they went through at such a young age that these mechanisms and these behaviors developed as a way of self-defense. So not every borderline is toxic and horrible. Sometimes it's going to be a challenge consistently, it will. But it just depends. The number one question you have to ask is the person wrestling with borderline able to recognize the pattern? And number 2, are they willing to get the help? If they're enthusiastically willing to get the help, if they can see their own pattern of back and forth and pull you close and push you away, if they can see that, a lot of times they're just as miserable as the pain they're causing you. Because imagine what it's like if you don't know how to be certain about being certain. Imagine if no matter what you do, you end up beating yourself up and dealing with feelings of self-loathing and shame because you don't know how to make the right decision, because you don't know really how to trust yourself. Probably because you were raised in an environment that taught you that you shouldn't trust yourself. So that's what they're going through. So if this fits, and I mean if it fits well, I don't mean if it fits one or two little aspects. I'm not trying to be one of those people that throws around the term borderline. I don't like that. I don't like people that do that. If multiple things line up and it seems like this might fit, all I'm suggesting is don't trust me like I'm a doctor. I'm not a doctor. But if enough of these factors fit, it might be a good idea. I would encourage you to go talk to a mental health professional. If you're the person dealing with borderline and what I just described fits your life, go talk to somebody. You can get help for this. It's not evidence that something's wrong with you and that you're broken. It's usually evidence that you have a very high intellect, that you're a very sensitive and intense person, and that you went through some really painful moments at a really young age when you didn't know how to defend yourself. Fight or flight wasn't an option. So you developed these kind of characteristics. And part of the thing you had to learn, sadly enough, is to not trust yourself, but trust that domineering voice that was always kind of teaching you to doubt yourself. That's a holdover from that kind of environment. If you're dating somebody and this fits your life, understand what you're dealing with and understand that unless they get some help and they're willing to really kind of address it, you can't prove you will love and pull them out of this kind of behavior. They'll keep going back and forth. And every time they push you away and can easily pull you back, they'll lose a little bit more respect for you. So the time away from you gets longer. The time together gets shorter, but the pattern just keeps on going and it can be just agonizing. So this is why I'm making this video. There's a lot of people that have no idea why they're in the situation they're in. They don't know how the person that's loved them better than anybody else they've ever known suddenly stops loving them and pushes them away and then pulls them back and then pushes them away and then pulls them back. So that's why I'm making this video. If this applies to you, talk to somebody that can help. If I can help, if you're in a relationship like this, I do coaching calls for people going through this. Just let me know. You can find me at dotheyloveme.com. So these are some consistent factors that I found when dealing with somebody that's wrestling with borderline personality disorder with a subset of discouraged, to help kind of identify if you're dating somebody or if you might be wrestling with it yourself. Specifically the subset of discouraged borderline. Normally, but from the time they come home from the hospital, they're placed in an emotionally inconsistent environment. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes they're loved, sometimes they're a disappointment. So there's kind of this up and down. The mother is usually the original relationship that kind of starts the dominoes falling when it comes to borderline. In other words, she's usually overly critical or overly protective, but there's an unusually, exceptionally close relationship there. More often than not, it is critical, but it can be overly protective. It could be that hovering mother. Most of the time, not always, most of the time, the father is actually absent or super nice guy. He kind of lets his wife kind of rule the roost. She kind of sets the tone for the house, and he's either not there or he's the lapdog. He's the flying monkey. He's a super nice guy. By the time that this person, this child, usually a girl, but not always, becomes a teenager, they're wrestling with unusual levels of depression, anxiety, second guessing. They're really starting to develop idealized thinking. And the reason they're wrestling with anxiety and stress and depression is it's hard to live up to idealized thinking. They feel this drive and this need to attain this level of perfection that nobody can hit. So on the outside, they might already be impressive. They might already be accomplishing good things in school and behaving and performing at a certain high degree of standard. But inside, they feel like they don't measure up. They're already kind of having this broken sense of identity. By the time they're a young adult, the person that they're most likely to be attracted to are three types: the narcissist, the exceptional planner, the really nice guy who's good at putting things together and structure and has a high sense of morals and has a good mind for planning and being organized, and this is the plan for my life, and this is what we should do, and this is what we shouldn't do. And then the third guy is kind of what we call that conqueror mentality, where they just have a strong boldness. That guy that's actually kind of heroic. The dude that's kind of, they'll tell you what he's thinking, he'll tell you what he believes. He's romantic, he's funny, he's outgoing, he's gifted, he's sure of himself, he's confident. The kind of guy that's got a heroic nature and is justice oriented. She's attracted to all three of those types of guys because all three of them have what she's lacking. And that's a strong sense of identity, a strong sense of who they are. So they're attracted to people that have a strong sense of identity. And when they meet this person, it's like fireworks. It's not just limerence, it's limerence times 10. It's amazing. It's the love of your life. You feel like you connect spiritually, emotionally, physically, sexually, mentally. It's just like a connection on multiple levels like you probably haven't felt before. And it's euphoric. It's a wonderful relationship until it looks like the two of you are going to be together long term, until something happens to kind of shake this in pursuit mode, and it goes from being in pursuit and falling in love to it looks like we might be together for a long time, getting married, getting engaged, moving in together, moving to the same city. Something that on the outside looks like it's a good sign. It solidifies your relationship, but it actually triggers a fear and an anxiety. And suddenly this person who loved you more than any other person before is pushing you away. If you fight and try to convince them to keep you in their life, if you try to talk them out of breaking up with you, then you can watch the attraction drain until they're positive they don't want to be with you. They can even get really cold, really cruel, and really cold-blooded while they're disconnecting and pushing you away. If, on the other hand, you walk away with strength and confidence and resilience that you might not feel, but you project it anyway, then it'll trigger a sense of remorse, trigger a sense of anxiety. Maybe they made a mistake. They come after you. If they come after you and they get you back, not long after that, very soon after that, they'll push you away again and they'll disconnect. And they'll just start following that pattern of back and forth, back and forth. You get too far away, they really feel anxiety about losing you forever. You get too close, they start feeling anxiety about getting too close. That's what it looks like when you're dating somebody with borderline, and it won't stop. It goes back and forth. The pattern goes on and on. So that's another marker of dealing with somebody with borderline. And it's so extreme that at times it'll feel like you're dealing with two different people. One person is positive of how much they love you. They're positive of how they see you. They know they want you back. They miss you when you're gone. They cry a lot during the breakup. But then you come back because you can see they're in pain. And suddenly, because you're back, the anxiety comes back. And suddenly they're sure that they can't be with you. So they'll even articulate it. I don't know what I want. It's a fear of abandonment and a fear of engulfment. If that's what you're dealing with, those are the markers. The number one thing I've seen that they're drawn to is the medical profession. They're drawn to the medical field, they're drawn to teaching, and they're drawn to doing something creative. Because a lot of times teaching in the medical field, deep down they wrestle with this sense of value. So if you go into a field like medicine, if you go into a field like teaching, it's one way to kind of reinforce the idea to themselves they're a good person. Because underneath that identity crisis, there's a feeling of being broken. There's a feeling that they can never really maintain or measure up to what they envision in their minds they should be, which is perfect. They have a drive to be perfect. So a lot of times they'll get into one of those three fields. So if all of those things line up, or if a lot of those things line up, then that might be what you're dealing with. And again, if it sounds like that might be what you're going through right now, I just encourage you to talk to a professional, or at least to have it looked into. You don't have to trust me. I'm not trying to diagnose somebody over YouTube. That's not the goal. I'm just trying to give information so people that are really suffering and don't know why they're suffering have a better idea of maybe what they're dealing with.